They have not said it. They will not say it. Not in the direct, unambiguous, here is what you mean to me form that would require the specific vulnerability their psychology is most organized to prevent. There will be no declaration, no moment where they sit across from you and say, clearly and without the buffer of casualness or irony or the strategic deployment of emotional distance, that you are someone they have claimed. That in the interior space they guard so carefully, in the private architecture of their own mind that they permit almost no one to enter, you have been given a room, a permanent one that was not offered, not consciously constructed, not the result of a decision they made, but rather the result of something that happened before the decision could be prevented. But the claiming happens, quietly, without announcement, often before the avoidant themselves fully understands what has occurred. The interior staking of territory that manifests not in words but in the specific, subtle, often easy to miss behavioral and relational signals that something in them has shifted in your direction in a way that their ordinary management of connection does not quite explain. These signals are worth knowing, not as tools for the manipulation of an outcome. That is not what they offer, and attempting to use them that way misunderstands both their nature and the nature of the interior process they reflect. But as accurate information about what is actually happening in someone whose exterior and interior are rarely in close correspondence, and whose claiming of another person therefore tends to be most visible, not in what they say, but in the quiet, unremarkable, easily overlooked texture of how they behave when their guard is engaged with something other than concealing what they actually feel. The first quiet sign is the one that tends to arrive earliest and to be most easily rationalized away by both parties. It is the specific quality of their attention when you are speaking. Not the polite, socially competent attention of someone who is performing engagement while their interior is elsewhere. The avoidant is skilled at that performance, has deployed it consistently throughout their relational history, and it has a recognizable texture that is different from what is being described here. What is being described is the attention that arrives before the performance has had time to be arranged. The involuntary orientation of a person whose interest in you is genuine enough to operate faster than their management system. It shows up in the specific quality of stillness that comes over them when you are talking about something that matters to you. Not a performed stillness, a real one. The particular absence of the low-level distraction and self-monitoring that characterizes the avoidant in most social interactions. The background processing of how they are being perceived. The maintenance of the composed, self-sufficient presentation, the slight remove from full engagement that keeps them from being too present in any interaction that might require something of them emotionally. When you are speaking, that background processing quiets. They are simply in what you are saying, with a completeness of attention that they do not bring to most things, and that, if you are paying attention to the specific quality of it, is distinguishable from ordinary politeness by its involuntary character. By the fact that it is not being managed. It is simply there, pointed at you, without the deliberate direction that most of the avoidance relational behavior requires. This attention is claiming. It is the interior saying, without any permission from the conscious management system, that what you are saying matters, that you are someone whose words are worth the full quality of presence that the avoidant almost never offers without reservation. That in the specific, involuntary, impossible to entirely fake register of genuine interest, you have been placed in a category of people for whom the usual distance is insufficient. The usual distance has been quietly, without announcement, revised in your direction. The second quiet sign is in how they remember you. Not that they remember you. Memory is not itself diagnostic of claiming, since people remember many things without claiming them. The specific, particular, slightly disproportionate quality of what they remember. The detail that was small enough that you yourself may have forgotten saying it, an offhand reference to something you loved as a child, a passing mention of a fear you carry, a brief and unremarkable expression of something you found beautiful or funny or worth noticing, and that surfaces, weeks or months later, in a moment where the avoidant references it, not to perform attentiveness, because it stayed. Because their interior, without being instructed to, held it. The avoidant who has claimed you in their mind is running a continuous, largely unconscious process of accumulating you, of building an interior representation of who you are from the specific, accumulated detail of your actual expressions and responses and moments of genuine self-revelation, rather than from the generalized, surface-level impression of a person they are not particularly invested in. This accumulation is not a decision. It is the natural result of genuine investment, of an interior that has oriented toward you enough to find the small things worth keeping, rather than allowing them to pass through the processing system without retention. When those small things surface, when they reference the detail you forgot you offered, when they connect something happening now to something you said in an entirely different context weeks ago, that surfacing is the claiming becoming briefly visible. The interior representation asserting itself through the exterior in a moment when the management system was not specifically tasked with preventing it. Notice it when it happens. It is one of the quietest and most genuine signals available in the full range of what claiming looks like in someone who will not claim you out loud. The third quiet sign lives in how they behave when something in your life goes wrong. The avoidant, in most relational contexts, responds to other people's difficulty with a specific and consistent pattern, the pattern of the competent, slightly removed helper. They can offer practical assistance without emotional proximity, can provide useful information or logistical support while maintaining the careful distance from the emotional weight of the difficulty that their system requires. This is not callousness. It is the avoidant's genuine attempt to be useful within the constraints of what they can offer, without activating the threat response that full emotional proximity produces. But when something goes wrong for you, when you are genuinely hurt or frightened or carrying something heavy, something different tends to happen in the avoidant who has claimed you. The competent helper pattern begins, and then something interrupts it. Something in them moves toward you in a way that the pattern does not account for, a reaching that goes slightly beyond the practical, a concern that is slightly less managed than their usual expression of concern for people outside their inner circle, a quality in the attention that is warmer and more present and less carefully maintained at the productive remove that ordinary care requires. They may not know how to express this, may fumble it, may offer something that looks, from a distance, like the ordinary competent helper response, but that carries, in the specific quality of how it is offered, an intensity of investment that is not ordinary. They may stay slightly longer than the situation requires, may check back in at a moment when the practical necessity of checking in has passed, may ask how you are in a tone that is different, more genuinely asking, less performing the asking, than the tone they use with most people. This is the claiming pushing against the management. The interior investment in your well-being asserting itself in the behavioral register with whatever force it can muster against the considerable resistance of the avoidance standard emotional distance protocol. It does not always win the contest cleanly. It does not always produce the full, warm, undefended expression of genuine care that the investment underneath would, in a less defended person, naturally generate. But it changes the texture of the response. And that changed texture, read accurately and without the hope distortion that the relational dynamic can produce, is real information about what is happening in the interior. The fourth quiet sign is perhaps the most counterintuitive and the most frequently misread, which is precisely why it deserves careful and honest examination. It is the sign of increased withdrawal at specific moments. Not the general baseline withdrawal of the avoidance ordinary relational management that is simply the operating condition, not a signal of anything particular, but the specific, noticeably intensified withdrawal that occurs in the moments when something between you has been genuinely close, when a conversation went deeper than usual, when a moment of genuine connection occurred that neither of you was fully prepared for, when something real passed between you in a way that the avoidance system registered as significant before the management could intercept the registration. The intensified withdrawal after genuine closeness is the defense system responding to a specific threat level, and the threat level is calibrated to the investment. Lower investment produces lower threat response, produces lower withdrawal intensity. Higher investment, the investment of someone who has in their interior already claimed you, produces higher threat response, produces the specific, noticeable, slightly disproportionate to the apparent trigger withdrawal that signals something significant was activated. This needs to be held carefully because it is the sign most easily used as a justification for the hope that perpetuates the avoidant dynamic's most damaging features. The point is not that withdrawal after closeness means everything is going well, and the investment is deep, and the claiming has occurred, and patience will eventually produce the outcome the hope is reaching toward. The point is that the specific, intensified quality of the withdrawal can be distinguished from the baseline withdrawal, and that the distinction, when it is real and when it is read accurately rather than hopefully, is information about the interior investment rather than simply evidence of the pattern running without particular significance. The distinction requires honesty to read. Honest reading means acknowledging both what the signal indicates, genuine interior investment, claiming at the level of the interior, and what it does not indicate, readiness, availability, the presence of the conditions that would make a workable relationship possible. Both pieces of information are real. Both matter. The sign does not authorize hope beyond what the evidence supports. It simply accurately reflects the investment that is there, while leaving entirely open the question of whether that investment will ever find its way to behavioral expression sufficient to build anything real on. The fifth quiet sign is in the specific way they introduce you to the small number of people whose opinions actually matter to them. The avoidant social world tends to be carefully tiered, a large outer layer of people with whom surface engagement is maintained, a much smaller middle layer of people with whom something slightly more real is permitted, and a very small inner layer of people who actually have access to anything resembling the genuine, defended, real version. Movement between layers is not common and is not undertaken lightly. When the avoidant who has claimed you begins to introduce you, even peripherally, even with the casualness that is the avoidant's characteristic mode of presenting things that actually matter, to anyone in the inner or middle layer, the introduction is significant. Not as a romantic gesture, as an interior decision. The decision, made without full conscious acknowledgement, to allow the person they have claimed to exist in a context that matters to them. To permit the worlds to overlap, however slightly and however casually the overlapping is presented. To allow the people who know something real about the avoidant to know something about you, which implies, at the level where the avoidant's decisions about social geography are made, that you and the real version of themselves are beginning to occupy connected territory in their interior map. The introduction may be brief, may be presented as entirely unremarkable, just someone I know, just someone from work, just someone I've been spending time with. The casualness is the management system doing what it does, which is to reduce the apparent significance of things that are actually significant in order to maintain the presentation of someone for whom no one particular matters very much. But the fact of the introduction, the decision to allow it, however casually framed, is not casual. It is the interior claiming finding a small, carefully managed, deniable if challenged, point of expression in the exterior world. The sixth quiet sign is how they talk about the future in your presence. Not necessarily the future of your relationship. That conversation is too direct, too requiring of the specific vulnerability that claiming as yet unacknowledged cannot support. The future more generally, their plans, their intentions, the texture of the life they are building or imagining building. The avoidant who has not claimed someone tends to speak about their future as an entirely solitary construction, a life they are imagining living that is populated at most with vague and unspecific references to other people. The future of someone who has organized themselves around self-sufficiency tends to look, when it is described, like a life built for one. But when the avoidant has claimed you, when the interior has already begun the quiet, non-conscious process of mapping you into the territory of what matters and who belongs in the inner circle, the future descriptions begin to carry a subtle quality that is different from the solitary construction. Not necessarily explicit references to you, not the direct, vulnerable, I imagine you being there kind of future talk that would require the acknowledgement of claiming that they are not yet prepared to make, but a quality of openness in how the future is described, a slight, possibly deniable, maybe you're imagining it quality of space being left, of a future that is described as if it is not entirely foreclosed to the presence of someone else, even when the someone else is not named. You may have to listen carefully for this. It is not always present. It does not always take a form that is clearly distinguishable from the ordinary, self-sufficient, future imagining of the avoidance baseline presentation. But when it is there, when the future description carries that slight openness, that quality of space not entirely occupied by the solitary, self-sufficient construction, it is worth noting. It is the interior claiming influencing the imagination of the future in small and largely unconscious ways. The having claimed you, quietly asserting itself in the vision of what comes next, without the conscious acknowledgement that claiming requires. The seventh quiet sign is the sign that tends to arrive last, and to be the most clear once it arrives, though it is still never the direct acknowledgement that would make everything simple and unambiguous. It is the sign of them defending you. Not to you, the avoidance defending of the person they have claimed in conversations with that person tends to look like ordinary engagement, not easily distinguished from how they engage with ideas or situations, rather than with the specific, person-directed quality of genuine defense. But in your absence, in conversations with others where your name comes up, or where something about you is referenced or implied, and the avoidant who is present produces a response that is slightly warmer, slightly more firm, slightly less inclined toward the non-committal neutrality that characterizes their engagement with topics that do not actually touch anything real in their interior. They correct the mischaracterization. They offer context that complicates the dismissal. They say something that, in the specific quality of its investment, reveals that the person being discussed is not a person about whom they are neutral, that the person being discussed has been claimed, given interior significance, allocated emotional investment, granted the specific and meaningful status of someone whose representation in other people's minds matters to the avoidant in a way that most people's representations do not. This sign is quieter than it sounds, because it tends to happen in contexts you are not present for, and therefore tends to be reported to you secondhand, if at all. But occasionally, in the moment of conversation where something is said about you, and the avoidance response has a quality that does not match the casualness they present your connection as having, it becomes briefly visible. Briefly. Before the management system registers what just happened and recalibrates. But briefly is enough. Briefly is real. Briefly is the interior claiming asserting itself before it could be managed back into silence. Taken together, these signs do not constitute a guarantee of anything. They do not promise readiness or availability or the presence of the conditions that would make a workable relationship possible. The avoidant can have claimed you in their mind, genuinely, significantly, with the specific and interior investment that all of these signs reflect, and still be unable, in their current state, to express or honor that claiming in the behavioral, consistent, shows up in the world way that genuine relationship requires. The claiming is real. The gap between the interior claiming and the exterior expression is also real. Both things coexist without canceling each other out. And the question of whether the gap narrows, whether the interior claiming eventually finds sufficient expression in behavioral reality to constitute something workable, is the question that only time and honest observation and the clear-eyed, non-hope-distorted reading of actual evidence can answer. What these signs offer is not hope. They offer accuracy. The accurate understanding of what is actually happening in the interior of someone whose exterior gives little away. The accurate knowledge that what you sensed, the investment, the claiming, the having been given significance in the interior of someone who gives significance to very few, was not imagined, was not the projection of your own feeling onto neutral ground, was real, is real. Whatever the exterior does or does not eventually do with it, the claiming happened. In the only place the avoidant can fully allow it to happen, in the interior, in the quiet, in the defended and rarely accessed place where what actually matters to them lives without permission and without announcement. You are there, in that place, permanent. Whether they ever find the words for it or not, whether the words would even be adequate to what is there, they would not be. What is there is larger than what the avoidant has language for. And the quiet signs, all of them, read together, held honestly, neither inflated by hope nor deflated by the self-protection that has learned to expect disappointment, are the most honest thing they have ever told you. The most honest thing they have ever told you. Let that phrase carry the weight it actually has, rather than the weight that hope or pain might assign it. Because honest, in the context of the avoidance quiet signs, means something specific. It means unmanaged. It means the information that escaped the filtering system, rather than the information the filtering system produced. And unmanaged information from a person who manages almost everything is, in the specific economy of what the avoidant actually communicates versus what they intend to communicate, the most reliable data available. But reliable data about the interior is not the same as reliable data about the future. This distinction deserves more than a passing acknowledgement, because it is the distinction that determines whether understanding the quiet signs serves you or traps you. The interior claiming is real. The gap between interior reality and behavioral expression is also real, and closing that gap, moving from the quiet, unannounced, behaviorally underexpressed claiming of the interior to the consistent, present, genuinely showing up in the world claiming that a real relationship requires, is not something that the interior claiming itself produces. It is something that requires the specific, sustained, difficult work that the avoidant psychology makes the most demanding thing available to them. Understanding this prevents the quiet signs from becoming another version of the hope that perpetuates the dynamic's most damaging cycle. The cycle where real signals of genuine investment are read as promises of eventual availability, and the reading of them as promises produces the continued investment of your time and energy and emotional resources in someone who has not yet demonstrated the capacity to honor what the interior is quietly, genuinely claiming. The quiet signs are not promises, they are descriptions. Accurate, real, non-imagined descriptions of an interior state that exists regardless of whether it ever finds sufficient behavioral expression to be useful to you. And the question of whether it finds that expression, the question that actually matters for your life and your choices, is not answered by the presence of the signs. It is answered by what happens after the signs, by the behavioral evidence that accumulates, or fails to accumulate, in the days and weeks and months of actual relational life. This needs to be said clearly because the quiet signs are compelling. They are compelling because they confirm something your perception already registered, that the investment is real, that the claiming has occurred, that what you sensed in the unguarded moments and the specific quality of the attention and the disproportionate withdrawal after genuine closeness was not projection, but accurate reading. Having that accuracy confirmed feels significant, feels like the validation of the perception that the avoidance exterior so consistently contradicted. And significant, validating feelings have a way of generating conclusions that the evidence does not fully support. The conclusion that because the claiming is real, patience will eventually be rewarded. That because the interior investment is genuine, the behavioral expression will follow if given enough time and enough space and enough consistent presence from you to make the expression feel safe. That conclusion is not guaranteed by the evidence. It is one possible outcome. It is also possible that the interior claiming remains exactly where it is, genuine, permanent, significant, while never producing the consistent behavioral expression that would make it something you could actually live inside of. The avoidance interior is not automatically moving toward expression simply because the investment there is real. It requires the specific, deliberate, against the conditioning work of someone who has decided that what they are carrying in the interior deserves to exist in the exterior too. And that decision is theirs alone, on their timeline alone, in their process alone. What you do with the quiet signs, given this full picture, is a question worth sitting with directly, rather than leaving implicit. Because the signs are real, and the gap is also real, and both of those things require something from you in terms of how you orient toward the situation. What the signs do not warrant is increased pursuit. The temptation, when the quiet signs confirm genuine interior investment, is to intensify the engagement, to bring more warmth, more presence, more of the specific things that produce the claiming in the first place, as if the claiming, once confirmed, needs to be consolidated by further demonstration of your value. That impulse, however understandable, misunderstands both the nature of the claiming and the psychology of the person in whom it has occurred. The claiming was not produced by the right amount of warmth or presence or demonstrated value. It was produced by you being genuinely yourself in proximity to someone whose interior responded to what you are. More of what produced the claiming does not close the gap between interior and exterior. It simply adds to the interior expression while leaving the behavioral expression where it is. What the signs also do not warrant is the dismissal of your own needs in service of giving the claimed but not yet expressed sufficiently dynamic more time to develop. The quiet signs confirm that something real is present. They do not alter the fundamental question of whether what is present is capable, in its current form, of producing what you actually need in a relationship. And what you need, the genuine, behavioral, consistently expressed, shows up in the world reciprocity that sustains rather than simply activates, is not negotiable. The claiming of the interior, however genuine, does not substitute for the expression of it in the ways that actually matter to your daily experience of being in relationship with this person. What the signs do warrant is clarity. The specific, useful, neither inflated nor deflated clarity of someone who knows accurately what is there and what is not there, and is making their decisions from that accurate knowledge, rather than from the distortions that hope and pain and the consuming quality of genuine feeling can introduce. What is there? Genuine interior investment. Real claiming. The specific, unmanaged, escape the filtering system evidence that you occupy significant territory in the avoidance mind, and that the occupation is permanent rather than circumstantial. This is real. It is not nothing. It is, in the specific context of what the avoidant allows themselves to feel for another person, quite extraordinary. What is not there yet, or what has not yet been demonstrated to be there in sufficient and consistent form, the behavioral expression of the interior investment. The consistent, reliable showing up in the world claiming that matches what the interior already contains. The closing of the gap between what they feel and what they do. The specific, effortful, against the conditioning choosing of expression over management, that genuine relationship, your genuine relationship, the kind that actually sustains you, requires. Holding both of those clearly, what is there and what is not there yet, is the practice. The ongoing, daily, requires regular recalibration practice of someone who is navigating the specific complexity of caring for a person whose interior and exterior are in significant, non-trivial, not easily closed divergence, and navigating it with your self-respect intact, with your needs clearly in view, with the honest accounting of what the evidence is showing you running alongside the genuine feeling that the situation produces, neither one drowning out the other. The self-respect means that the confirmation of interior claiming does not extend your patience indefinitely, does not purchase unlimited time for the gap to close, does not justify the indefinite subordination of what you need to the question of whether they will eventually become capable of expressing what they already, quietly, genuinely feel. There is a limit. The limit is yours to determine. It is not arbitrary, and it is not punitive. It is the simple, self-respecting recognition that what you bring to a relationship deserves to be met, in the behavioral world where relationship actually happens, with sufficient expression of the interior investment to constitute something real.